you have made a bunch of movies, and a lot of the movies that you made, the documentaries you made, have been focused on the civil rights history, of the civil rights movement, on the freedom rides, Freedom Summer. This is a different phase of the story. What attracted you to the notion of doing a movie on the Black Panther Party?
Well, I think, you know, that's a simple question, but it's a complicated answer because there's a lot of different reasons. I think the first was I was 15 or 16 years old when the Panthers came into being. So I saw this thing arise, you know, this whole different way of looking, different way of being, and I was fascinated by it. As I got into filmmaking, I just thought this was an incredible story that hadn't been told, you know, with great larger-than-life characters. It was a story that really wasn't known. There was great footage and music and stills, and so it seemed like a perfect topic to make a film on.
Right. You know, when you think about that moment in the mid to late '60s, right, where the transformation of the civil rights movement, the kind of splintering of it, you now have the Black Power movement, Stokely Carmichael, that stuff kind of giving rise to a more radicalized view. Talk about what was going on in Oakland when the Black Panthers started, how it arose. I think it's how the movement started, because I think it's of particular relevance to some of the discussions we're having today in America.
Sure. The Panthers started in 1966 in Oakland, California, and the Oakland police were notoriously brutal to the African-American community. And the Panthers really were just a group of guys who were in college and said, you know, we have to do something about this. So they formed a group, and they called themselves the Black Panthers. And what they did was they decided that they would police the police. Right. Because in California at that time, you could carry a loaded weapon as long as you carried it in the open.
Right.
So they would follow the police when the police would jump out to do a traffic stop or to confront somebody on the street. The Panthers would jump out behind the police, stay 10, 20 feet away, and just make sure that there was no violence that occurred in the stop.
There was a period, right, from 66 to, you know, 70, 71, when the group was probably at its peak at that point, and it was in 60, 70 cities around the country, where there were a lot of people in authority in America who considered them a great threat. J. Edgar Hoover among them, who said they were, you know, the greatest threat to internal security in America. What was it you think, I mean, it might seem like a really obvious question, but what was it that was so threatening, given the initial inspiration for the group, which was just to monitor the police and make sure that police brutality didn't take place? What happened in those 4 years that caused so much of white law enforcement and the white power structure to freak out about the Black Panthers?
Well, I think one of the things is the Panthers were in some ways a victim of their own success. So the image that first came to the public was these black men with guns, you know, that they had in Oakland. But that really didn't last long, because very quickly after that, they changed the law in California that said, okay, you can't carry a gun.
Perhaps there was some relationship between those two things.
Little. So, you know, so after that, the Panthers really kind of changed in a lot of ways. But that was the image that was in people's mind. And I think even worse, that was the image that was in J. Edgar Hoover's mind, the director of the FBI, who really just went ballistic and kind of went all out in doing anything he could to destroy the Panthers.
You talked about, I want to come back to that image, the image of the group, which became very seductive for a lot of people, both black and white, for a period of time. But you talked about the great characters in this movie. So let's just talk real quickly about some of these characters who really were incredibly glamorous in some ways at one point. Huey Newton, Bobby Seale, Fred Hampton, Eldridge Cleaver. To talk about those bigger-than-life characters and how they were received by the kind of pop culture consciousness in America at the time.
Well, Huey Newton and Bobby Seale really were the founders of the party. They were in college, and Huey Newton was kind of a real intellectual, just a brilliant guy. But Huey Newton was, you know, Huey Newton was beyond handsome. Huey Newton was beautiful. I mean, Huey Newton was just, you know, just incredibly charismatic, incredibly good-looking. But he went to jail early on in a shootout that happened with an Oakland police officer and was in jail. And so nobody saw Huey, but there arose this huge Free Huey movement, and everybody knew Free Huey, although people didn't know who Huey was. Exactly. You know, Bobby Seale had this incredible personality. Bobby Seale had been an entertainer. Bobby Seale was just somebody that you liked and loved and was a great spokesperson. Eldridge Cleaver joins the party, and Eldridge Cleaver had just gotten out of jail. But Eldridge Cleaver had written this book, Soul on Ice, while in prison. And the book was on the top 10 of the New York Times bestsellers. So all of a sudden you have this guy who's this literary star who says, you know, I'm going to join this group. Right. And so that, you know, also helped to kind of increase the mystique of the Black Panthers.
You know, you talked about how the group changed, and obviously they started doing other things. They started doing, like a lot of groups on the left, they started having caring about community health and education and other things in inner city areas. But again, the image of them was very powerful, right? And you know, I think for a lot of people, one of the most famous kind of things in literary, political, social literary journalism is when Tom Wolfe wrote about Radical Chic, right, and the Leonard Bernstein fundraiser for the Black Panthers here in New York City in around 1970 or so. What was it about the Panthers that was so seductive, in your view, to certain segments of the American white left?
I think, look, I think the Panthers were seductive to everybody. You know, they were great at using the media. You know, they had this look that we had never seen before. You know, the traditional civil rights movement was Martin Luther King, right, Ralph Abernathy. It was very church-based, you know, suit and tie, very buttoned up. But here are black men and women with big afros and berets and leather jackets and sunglasses and looking cool. And the other thing I think that is hard to grasp is that we had never seen, nobody had ever seen a black man, you know, with his finger pointed in a white man's face. Right. You know, look, you've got to do this. We had never seen that. I mean, in the history of the country, right, you could be killed for that. But that's who the Panthers were. It was a whole different aggressive attitude that people hadn't seen. And I think it was seductive for a lot of different groups.
You mentioned parenthetically just now, you said, and women. Obviously, the most famous people in the Black Panthers were all men.
Right.
There was, in parts of the black left in the 60s, there was a misogyny that was pretty deeply built into the movement, and especially, as I said, kind of the black power piece of it, not as much the conventional civil rights piece. What was the role of women in the Black Panthers? It was there was an interesting role that they did play.
Well, I think that in a lot of what the Panthers tried to do was to have some kind of equality for women. So one of the most startling quotes in the film is that by the early 70s, the majority of Panthers were actually women. Kathleen Cleaver was this spokeswoman for the Panthers. She was married to Eldridge, but Kathleen, you know, was just, she looked like a model. She was beautiful, had this big afro. You know, everybody, you know, that I grew up with was in love with Kathleen Cleaver. I mean, we just loved Kathleen, you know. Elaine Brown was another spokesperson for the party. So the party, in some ways, tried to, you know, have some kind of equality for women. But as Elaine Brown says in the film, you know, we didn't get these brothers in the party from revolutionary heaven. Right. You know, they carried all the problems that men at that time had with women.
The Black Panthers, you know, kind of unraveled, right, over time, and you know, now there's a new Black Panther Party, or at least in a lot of people on the right, there's that's become a new bogeyman in a lot of ways. I don't want to talk about that too much, but there was a reason why the thing lost steam, and part of it had to do with crime and drug dealing and extortion and things that happen. What is it, in your view? What is it that caused the eventual kind of downfall of the party, of the movement?
Well, you know, I think that's one of the to me, one of the hardest parts and the best parts of the film is to tell the story, warts and all. And I think there are a number of things. I think, you know, J. Edgar Hoover and the FBI had this program called COINTELPRO, which went after the party, sure, and you know, pick no bones about it. You know, we're going to go after the party with everything we have. Right. And one of the things that they set out to do was to set the party members against each other. And you had very volatile members, you know, Eldridge Cleaver, sure, Huey Newton, and they were kind of set against each other. And the party not only kind of was destroyed from outside, you know, the FBI and police departments, but also it imploded, you know, from inside. And I think that's really, you know, the truth of what happened to the party.
So let's just talk about legacy a little bit. And you know, one of the things, I saw a quote of yours in an interview you gave where you said, without the Black Panther Party, there would have never been hip-hop. Please elaborate on that thesis.
Well, it's that whole attitude, you know, that you had never seen before. You know, that kind of, you know, I'm going to do what I do, and I don't care what you think about it. My role here isn't to satisfy you or to make you like me. Right. My role is to tell the truth, and if you like it, that's fine. If you don't like it, that's fine too. Because there's going to be a group of people who understand what I'm talking about and like what I'm talking about.
Right.
And I think in some ways, that you can boil that down to kind of this hip-hop attitude.
Right. I mean, one of the most striking things of this summer to me has been the incredible success, kind of an unexpected success of the movie Straight Outta Compton, which has been playing in multiplexes all over the country. NWA is kind of having a renaissance with a lot of young people who didn't know that group at the time now watching this movie. And I think a large part of the reason for that is the context, right? That is a thing that's the movie has particular resonance at this moment with Black Lives Matter and with all of the things that have happened in terms of the police and African Americans over the course, unfortunate things, tragic things, in some cases kind of criminal things that have happened over the course of the last 18 months, 2 years. What's the through line for you between this movie and where we are right now in terms of some of the very same issues that the Black Panthers were confronting in the late 60s and that African American communities are facing now with the police?
Sure. Well, the Black Panthers started 50 years ago, almost exactly 50 years ago this year. And they started as a result of police brutality, as a way to confront this police brutality that was going on in the African American community. We're 50 years later and we're still in the same place. And I think that part of the reason why we're in the same place is because that's never been healed. We're still in the same place. It was never rectified. And so here we are in the exact same place. And we've got groups that are, again, saying this is something we have to do for ourselves. We can't wait. Black lives, we're losing black lives. We are losing them. And how do we correct that ourselves? And I think that's really important. But the Black Panthers also had a 10-point program, and that was end of police brutality, full employment for black people, better housing, better schools, et cetera, things that we're still talking about now, 50 years later.
Right. A lot of the basic economic and social structures and conditions have not changed that much. Yeah. There's been a lot of progress, obviously, in America in terms of race relations, but many of those issues that they wanted to address are still urgent issues facing a lot of minority communities.
Right. I think that the civil rights movement changed things a great deal for a few people. Right. But for the vast majority of African Americans, their daily lives haven't changed that much. They still go to segregated schools. They still have problems with police. They still they're still high unemployment. I think those things haven't changed.
When with the movie opening, there are a lot of former Black Panthers still around. Obviously, some of them are elected officials in various places in the country. Yeah, I know you got a lot of help from a lot of people to make this movie. Are you going to see a lot of them coming out for the movie now that it's on the big screen?
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that we're doing, the film opens in New York, and then it goes to 20 cities around the country. And believe it or not, I'm going to all 20 cities. Yeah. And if you go to our website is theblackpanthers.com. If you go to theblackpanthers.com, it has a whole schedule. And one of the things we're doing is having guests at almost every screening, every night, in every city. We're bringing Panthers and photographers and politicians and other groups to come and speak about the issues back then, about the issues today. And again, I'll be there in 20 cities.
Right. You're going to be a tired man when that's all over.
I'm not thinking about it. I'm just going to do it.
You're just going to do it.
I'm just going to do it.